Good, thanks. Okay, so Steve Davis. So I was here at Cinderblocks 1, not here, Kansas City. It was a great event. This is an awesome event too. It was great to hear Dave talk about some of the issues that he was bringing up. And as he did, I thought to myself, there's something I got to talk about here. And I hadn't planned doing a talk. So I went over to Regina and asked her if I could have 5 or 10 minutes. And I put together some quick slides about what I wanted to say. So this is what this is about. So I'm a psychiatrist. At the APA meeting, which is always in May, we just had that in Toronto. And so this is I gave a couple of talks. One was on suicide prevention. There's actually a symposium with suicide survivors talking about what's important to them, how to treat people who've attempted suicide in a better way than what oftentimes happens, especially in an emergency room, is take off all your clothes or lock you up and all this stuff. So that was one topic. The other was about privacy issues, and particularly about, so here's something that comes up a lot is somebody with a mental health problem, or really any problem that's very sensitive information that you don't want all your providers to know about. You just want to limit it to the ones that are really involved with that particular issue. And it could be reproductive issues, it could be HIV, it could be mental health, it could be certain genetic conditions, really anything that a patient decides is something I don't want to share with everybody, I want to limit it. The way HIPAA is written, anyone that's involved in your care can access your information, except for something called psychotherapy notes, which is this specially protected area that psychiatrists, psychologists, other mental health folks pushed for during the HIPAA legislation, which says essentially stuff that's in a psychotherapy note can be protected so that it's not available to everyone. And it's up to the person who authored it to determine who can access it. So it's more protected because we don't have a place to put some of that stuff. So this is so I talked about that at the meeting. Oh, and so I swapped out the slide, the picture behind this, because originally it was a bunch of water, and this is from yesterday. So briefly, so I mentioned I'm a psychiatrist. Unfortunately, Kate Rowe, who's a patient advocate that many of you probably know, she and I are in business together. We have a consulting company called Fuse Health Strategies, and we focus on fusing behavioral health and primary care together, integrating those things, and helping practices and other groups think about and do that. She's NCQA qualified to get people who have patient-centered medical homes up to level 1 or 2 or 3. So these are the areas that I operate in: health IT, healthcare policy, primary care, behavioral health, and just a few of the hats I wear. URAC, people usually ask, is a accreditation organization for primarily for insurance companies, but other types of things too. And I've been on that for 10 years. We set healthcare standards that they have to operate on. All right, so here's what I wanted to talk about. In this background picture, last night from the firewalkers, didn't come out too well, but those are a couple of the flames from the firewalkers. So the APA has something called an assembly, and the assembly is kind of like our legislative body, if you will. So when somebody wants to pass some sort of position or bind the organization to take some sort of action, then the assembly is where you bring this up in the form of an action paper, which in legislation we'd call it a bill. We debate it, and there are all of the people in the assembly. I'm one of them. Me and one other guy, Bob Roca, represent Maryland in the assembly. Each district branch, so each state has a number of representatives in this assembly. And so somebody from California brought up this is the title of this action paper: Unsafe and Uncontrolled Access to Mental Health Records Affecting 21.5 Million Veterans. So this was, I think, maybe 2 years ago when this action paper came out. It wound up passing. What it said was essentially the VA has turned on this blue button thing so that everyone can access everything. And they didn't carve out mental health information at all. So it's available to everybody and so forth. And they wanted us to take some sort of action. So we looked at it, we kind of debated it, we made some changes to it, but here are some of the concerns. So the concern was that access to that information at any time, especially in somebody who is kind of at a place where suicidal thinking is maybe very close, they may read some information that might kind of push them over. That's kind of the fear. We don't really know. There's nobody, and he said there's no evidence, so nobody studied. Does access to that information make it more likely or less likely that something bad is going to happen? So a lot of this, I think, anxiety about access to patient's own information is about fear, about something I wrote in a note and having some downstream negative effect. And so one of the fears is, well, how do we learn to write better notes so that patients can actually use them and they're helpful to them? And so one of the outcomes of this action paper was also for us to develop some education and training materials so that we are sensitized to how patients view their records and how we can write better so that we're clear and understandable and there are less misunderstandings. So they were concerned about this risk of provoking dangerous behaviors. And this last bullet was the one that really got the author of the action paper, who works in a VA setting. Impulsive chart review by intoxicated or otherwise impaired patients. The risk is elevated as veterans often have access to their guns in their homes. They're intoxicated. They go on there and say, that damn doctor said this about me, blah, blah, blah. And they're worried about something bad happening. So I wanted to sensitize you all to know what an organization like the American Psychiatric Association, the things that are being talked about and concerned about and what we're trying to do to address it. So this was rewritten as a position statement, and so we developed a position statement on patient access to electronic mental health records. And so because the APA had no formal position on access to your records. And because of that, we came up with this. And a group of us from ethics, from an ethics standpoint, from a legal standpoint, from a clinical care standpoint, and from the VA standpoint, came together on numerous conference calls and developed these things. And so I'm also kind of looking for a little bit of input because just 3 weeks ago, when this position statement was heard in the assembly, we debated it, and eventually they turned it down. They did not pass this by a vote of like 60 to 50, something like that. And they sent it back to our committee, so we've got to work it up to fix a couple of problems. And any feedback you guys have would be helpful for me because I'll be on that work group. So number one, and there's...
Sorry, but could you just give us 1 second? So we're all eating, and I think we're like half listening, and I think that's really an important piece. So would you just ask us what you just asked us again so that we can help?
Thank you for the opportunity to highlight that. So what I'm asking for is, I'm going to explain these 4 or 5 bullets here about what our APA's proposed position is.
So the APA.
The APA, American Psychiatric Association, 35,000 psychiatrists. And the assembly had some problems with this and want us to rework some of the language. And I'll tell you what the problems are, and I'm looking for any input either now while you're eating or even come up to me later about that will help me communicate everyone's input here to this committee that's going to rework the language.
Okay.
Casey.
Did this specifically come out of the VA? I'm not going to turn this into a long thing, but...
No, it did not. This position statement didn't come out of the VA, but the VA was the catalyst that got this ball rolling down the hill.
Because the VA shrinks are concerned?
A subset of VA psychiatrists are concerned, shrinks.
That the only gun-involved incident that I personally know of no, let me finish.
You should finish.
That I personally know of psychiatry plus guns and military is the Fort Hood shooter who was a shrink. He was
Yes.
a PsyMD.
Wait. Let's not use the word shrink. I don't think that's a...
No, he was a psychiatrist, an Army, a military psychiatrist, and he was the one that picked up the gun and shot people up. It was not a soldier.
That is correct.
So, just saying.
Yeah.
I think this is flipped
And that was
upside
deemed as a terrorist event or something like that. But yeah.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for what you're trying to do. Thank you for making such an effort to make such a beautiful presentation. And now let us.
Ta-da! Okay, so so methods for ensuring. So the idea is that the APA would develop. What we're suggesting to the world is that EHRs should have methods for ensuring that treating psychiatrists. Now, we're just addressing psychiatrists. This could be all physicians or healthcare workers. Treating psychiatrists in the system, the EHR system, are notified when their patients access their records. So that way, you can go, well, next time you see the person, you can say, I see that you've looked at your records. That's great. Let's talk about what you learned. Do you have any questions? It seems like a good patient engagement thing to do. So that's one, and nobody seemed to have a problem with that. Two, methods for ensuring that information likely to result in harm to the patient or others would not be disclosed. So this really refers to this kind of HIPAA-protected area psychotherapy notes, because that's the only place you can put something that has formal protections beyond everybody can see it.
So can you give us an idea of what that might look like?
Yeah.
What type of information? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay. So an example of that information might be, I'll use Mark's example. Patient was molested by his father for X period of time, and maybe the father's still alive. Maybe he doesn't want everybody in the world to know about that. And so that's one example. Another example is somebody's spouse calls up and says, well, I know you're treating my husband. I just want you to know, don't tell him anything, but I think part of the reason he's having some of the problems is he's been having some concerns about me. I'm actually having an affair, but I haven't told him. I don't want anyone to know about it. I'm trying to make it all kind of go away. I wouldn't probably document that, but if you thought that type of information was important, where do you put it so that the cat doesn't get out of the bag?
Okay.
That's an example, I guess.
Is that in terms of whether or not the result in harm will occur, is that solely determined by the psychiatrist?
This is a problem I have. This is very subjective, right? I rarely come up with information that I think is going to be harmful if a patient sees it. When I ran a department of psychiatry for 9 years, I would regularly get people saying, I want to look at my records, and the hospital has a policy that the psychiatrist has to say, okay. And I would look at their information and I'd say, what's the problem? Okay. And I just said okay to all of them.
And if you find that information, don't you as a psychiatrist have a legal obligation to report that to the authorities? So that's one of the things, much like the Africa Code, that you have to violate.
Yeah. So that's a little bit different. That's if you feel like somebody is in immediate danger, you have to take steps to minimize or reduce or prevent that danger. That's not what they're talking about here. This is talking about, I'm fine, but now I read something and I learned something that the doctor wrote that now I'm worried everybody's going to know, and I might as well just end it. That's the type of concern. So anyway, and that one, people in the assembly really didn't seem to have a concern about either. It's the bottom one. 3, methods for ensuring that the information provided in confidence, this is somewhat related to number 2, will not be inadvertently disclosed. So like I said, a spouse who provides some information, how to make sure that if you put it in a regular note, anyone who's involved in your care could see that. And they may not know the background about information, and they may just come up and say, well, I see, this is what's going on. It's like, how did you know that? Methods for facilitating patient comprehension of disclosed information. This speaks to health literacy and helping to make sure that there are ways, glossary or some, we use a lot of jargon. How do you turn that jargon into something that a patient would understand? Or maybe use less jargon. So that's really what that refers to. And this is the last one that seemed to trip everybody up. Methods for ensuring that the current inpatients, so people that are in the hospital now, may only access their records in consultation with the attending psychiatrist. So this is, I want to see my records while I'm in the hospital, while I'm getting treatment for suicidal depression, active psychotic schizophrenia, something like that. The concern was mostly the logistics of doing that are really challenging. Patients don't have access to a computer on the inpatient unit. They don't have access to cell phones because all cell phones have cameras, and there's privacy issues about that. So they wanted to make it clear that even though everyone kind of agrees that patients should have access to their information, there was a concern about the timing of it. Just a second. And so what the concern was this part right here, current inpatients. Others chimed in and said, well, if inpatients can have some kind of restriction so that the doc has to be present in the unit when they're reviewing the records to answer questions, one more minute I have, then what about outpatients? We think that you should only access your outpatient records if you've got a psychiatrist involved with you right then and there. And I'm like, no, that doesn't make any sense at all. I stood up in front of the assembly and I said why I disagree with that. They still outvoted it. So this is the part we need to rework, and I'm not sure how to handle it. Because what they're asking for, I don't think is legal or makes sense.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Right?
Limiting patient access is what you're saying. You don't think it's legal or makes sense to limit patient access?
Right. And I said that to them, and they still said, we voted it down.
So my concern is that if you're saying inpatients have to review their records with the doctor, how long is the delay until they can see the doctor to go over their records? Is it 24 hours? Is it
And can the doctor
3 days?
decline?
Is it their doctor? Is it his partner? Is the doctor have enough time to sit with somebody to go over their entire medical record?
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Thank you. I don't have answers. I'm collecting information.
Yeah, well, it says the attending, and that is, a valid question. So.
All right. And so, okay, I'm being dismissed. We got to move on. We got to keep things on track. So I'm going to stop and thank you all. Come up to me later if you have more to talk about. Thank you.